So, what's your plan, Mr. Garrett?
How would you like to buy a bank?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not wake up black this morning? Because I'm pretty sure I did.
I came here to try my hand at real estate.
You mad at millionaire units?
It's time that someone shine a bright light in order for things to change.
That's exactly what we're gonna do.
You want me to what?
Be us to the rest of the world.
We can't set foot in the bank unless we the help. He's talking about how two Negroes managed to buy two banks full of white folks' money and loan it to other Negroes.
Something's got to give.
You're a revolutionary.
The movie begins with a young black boy named Bernard, a shoe shiner. He intentionally sets up his stall outside a bank to attract wealthy white customers. Bernard isn't focused on earning small tips from shining shoes. Instead, he works slowly to eavesdrop on the financial conversations of his clients. Each time they leave, he quickly jots down what he hears in a notebook. His real goal is to learn valuable financial insights. From a young age, he dreams of becoming a banker. It's Texas in 1939, where severe discrimination limits opportunities for black people. His father, disheartened, tells him his dream is impossible, but Bernard's determined gaze says otherwise. 15 years later, Bernard moves to Los Angeles with his wife Eunice and their children. Discrimination here is less intense than back home, so he decides to start a business. The family of three lives in a rundown utility room at a relative's house, but Bernard promises his wife they'll soon have their own place.
I'll get you and him out of this shed as soon as possible.
He starts as a real estate agent, searching the city for properties. Observing keenly, he notices that while the black community is overcrowded, the white areas have plenty of vacant homes. He realizes black families need rental properties, but there's no market to meet that demand. He spots a white-owned apartment in poor condition with weeds by the front door. Yet he's the only one who recognizes its strategic location, right next to the black community. He approaches the owner and says, "You only rented out half of the apartment. Why not sell it to me? I'll pay you $30,000 now, and I'll add another $5,000 once I rent out all the rooms." Although the owner admires his idea, he refuses, not wanting to take any risks. Bernard understands and leaves.
You offering 35?
I can give you 30.
It's not the way I do business.
As he's leaving, he spots a calendar on the owner's desk from a local bank manager, which sparks an idea. He says goodbye to the owner and heads straight to the bank to meet the manager.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Barker.
However, the manager's secretary, who discriminates against black people, refuses to let him in. Bernard waits at the bank door for hours, and when the manager finally steps out, he quickly stops him, saying, "I know one of your VIP customers, and my business will benefit him. Could you approve a loan for me?" The manager rejects him without a second thought. Later that night, the owner calls Bernard, asking if he tried to get a loan using his name. Bernard has no choice but to apologize. Surprisingly, the owner doesn't scold him, but admires his determination. The owner decides to back his loan application, and Bernard receives his first loan, allowing him to buy the property.
Well, do you want this loan or not?
Yes.
One day, an older white woman comes home from shopping and sees Bernard at her door. "What are you doing?" she asks sharply. He calmly replies, "I'm renovating the building." She gives him a mean look and says, "Workers like you should be careful." Bernard responds, "Don't worry, this is my building, and I'll take good care of it." Speechless, she storms off. Shortly after, the police arrive, telling Bernard that the old lady reported him, claiming he pretended to be the owner. Bernard unexpectedly takes out a copy of the real estate certificate, showing he had anticipated trouble and came prepared. The police realize the house truly belongs to him, so they leave in a huff. That night, Bernard returns to the apartment building. The elderly woman at the door spots him and tells him to leave, saying it's not the time for renovations. Calmly, Bernard responds, "I'm not a renovation worker now. I'm the owner." The woman is stunned and, a few days later, moves out angrily, unwilling to live in the same building as black people. As soon as she leaves, Bernard rents her unit to a black tenant, confident in the demand he had foreseen. The building fills quickly, and Bernard gives the follow-up payment to the former owner. Impressed, the former owner suggests they go into business together. Bernard selects properties and calculates income, while the owner handles negotiations and signs contracts. By acting as the public face, the owner shields the business from racial bias, and they split the revenue. Bernard agrees, and their partnership quickly becomes lucrative. Soon, Bernard moves from an apartment to a mansion, providing a happy life for his family. This is Bernard's strategy. When faced with discrimination, he avoids reacting impulsively, choosing instead to operate by his own rules with rational, economic gains as his goals. But life has its challenges. A few years later, the former owner passes away suddenly, leaving his share of the business to his widow. She harbors deep prejudice and wants to buy out Bernard's shares at an unfairly low price, threatening to sue if he refuses. In those days, court cases between whites and blacks rarely favor blacks. Unwilling to accept this, Bernard decides to fight in court, hoping to find someone to testify to his partnership with the former owner. He thinks of the bank manager, but the manager, now aligned with the widow, avoids him. Standing in the bank, Bernard looks around, recognizing the building as a symbol of the systemic discrimination he faces regularly, where he's often met with contempt because of his skin color. A bold plan forms in Bernard's mind. 4 banks operate in a single building, each one closing its doors to him because he's black. In that moment, Bernard has a brilliant idea. He'll buy the building and see who dares to discriminate against him again. He shares his plan with Joe, another black real estate developer in Los Angeles. At first, Joe thinks Bernard's idea is crazy. The land in downtown LA is extremely expensive, and no black person has ever purchased such property there. But after talking it over, Joe realizes Bernard isn't delusional, but highly strategic. Bernard explains that by owning the building, he'll force the banks to serve him. They won't dare refuse him a loan and will share valuable real estate trends, making his business run even smoother. Joe is impressed by the plan. Although he's very wealthy, he still faces discrimination. If he can outmaneuver white bankers on their own turf, he stands to make even more. However, they know they'll need a white agent to complete the deal.
I think of it in purely logical terms.
Do you plan on starting to buy real estate in white-only neighborhoods, Mr. Gary?
Bernard already has someone in mind. Matt, a trustworthy and ambitious renovator who's a bit inexperienced. Bernard and Joe begin training Matt in golf, high-class etiquette, strategic thinking, and real estate. Matt quickly masters golf and soon learns to calculate real estate values like a young entrepreneur. At the golf club, Matt meets the owner of the bank building, setting their plan in motion. Joe arranges the meeting, and the conversation goes well. Matt gets the chance to buy the building, but he's unsure how to negotiate. Before the negotiation, Bernard steps in to help Matt prepare. He counts the number of lights on in the building after dark to calculate its vacancy rate and estimates its value based on the annual revenue and operating costs. Bernard prepares every important figure and asks Matt to memorize them for his meeting with the owner. When the big boss tries to bluff, Matt confidently responds with exact numbers, shocking both the boss and his accountant. They assume they're dealing with a math genius who can't be fooled.
I'll tell you what, and you take an 18% instead of a 25% markup. You can choose.
You're not what I expected, Matt Steiner.
In the end, Bernard secures the building, initially priced at over $2.4 million, for only $1.56 million. From that point on, every bank president greets Bernard with respect, and the manager who once made things difficult for him is stunned. With the banking industry's support, Bernard and Joe's real estate business quickly expands. They break the strict racial zoning in Los Angeles, allowing many young, talented black professionals to move into white neighborhoods. Soon after, they even meet with the vice president. In 1963, Bernard takes his family back to Texas to visit his father, Britton. After dinner, Britton proudly acknowledges his son's achievements, and the next day, Bernard strolls around town with his son. They soon find themselves standing in front of the bank where Bernard once worked as a shoeshine boy. At that time, Texas was one of the most racist places in America. They spot a young boy shining shoes just like Bernard did as a child. To Bernard's surprise, the boy only shines shoes for white people. This small encounter deeply moves Bernard and sparks his sense of duty toward his community. Quietly, he decides to help improve housing for the black community in his hometown and challenge the status quo. The next day, Bernard visits Joe and proposes that they buy the Mainland Bank in Texas. Joe thinks the idea is crazy, given the severe racism in Texas, but Bernard presents compelling reasons for the purchase. In the end, Joe agrees to support him, and they bring Matt back as their frontman once more. They meet with the bank owner, Robert, along with Florence Sr. and Jr., to discuss the deal. Despite Florence Jr.'s suspicions, Florence Sr. sells the bank to Matt and his partners. With control of the mainland bank, Bernard starts helping African Americans in town get approved for loans, aiming to provide fair opportunities for housing and financial growth. Everything runs smoothly for a while, but Florence Jr. begins investigating the bank's loan approvals. One day, he follows Matt and confronts Bernard and Joe, threatening them with a letter from the U.S. Treasury Department, which plans to inspect the bank's operations in a month. After Florence Jr. leaves, the team discusses their next steps. Matt suggests they buy another bank and transfer the problematic loans there to avoid detection. Bernard and Matt discuss buying the Bank of Marlon Moore, with Bernard's main concern being the challenge of overseeing its operations. Matt suggested he should run the bank himself, which made Bernard uneasy, but he eventually agreed, deciding Eunice would supervise Matt. In the end, Matt got the control he wanted. The next day, Matt met with a lawyer and started signing loan contracts under the lawyer's guidance. Later, Florence Jr. called Matt, warning him that clients wanted to withdraw all their money from the mainland bank. Meanwhile, a federal bank examiner arrived at Marlin. To support Matt, Bernard disguised himself as a janitor to get close during the examiner's visit. However, the examiner quickly spotted major issues with several loans, leaving Bernard shocked that such risky loans were approved. They soon discovered Florence Jr. was behind it. Eager to manage his bank, Matt had ignored protocols and hired a lawyer Florence recommended, allowing Florence to slip in problematic loans. Later, Bernard and Joe advised Matt to walk away from the Bank of Marlin. Refusing to let go, Matt made a secret move, which Joe discovered the next day. Joe rushed to Mainland Bank with Bernard, and they confronted Matt over the loans while Florence watched, clearly pleased. Bernard asked for their financial books, but it was too late. The federal bank examiners arrived to revoke Mainland Bank's license. As they left the building, the FBI arrested Bernard and Joe, leaving Bernard to resist, but it was a futile effort. Later, Bernard and Joe meet with their lawyer and learn that their case is entangled in the country's racial politics. Meanwhile, Matt talks to Senator McClellan about testifying against his partners in exchange for freedom. That night, Matt considers his options and makes a call. Following McClellan's advice, Matt testifies against his partners at the Senate hearing the next day. Later, Bernard also meets with McClellan, who offers him a choice: take an immunity deal to confirm Matt's testimony or speak freely and face prison. Bernard chooses to speak his mind and addresses the country's racial discrimination. Soon after, both Bernard and Joe's fortunes are destroyed, and they receive federal prison sentences. Florence Jr. buys the Mainland Bank at a fraction of what Bernard and Joe had paid. Meanwhile, Matt Steiner faces no charges. Years later, Bernard and Joe are released from prison, and Eunice notices they seem content despite their losses. Joe reveals that they own neighboring properties in the Bahamas. Shocked, Eunice asks Bernard how that happened. Matt, it turns out, had called Bernard the night before his testimony, apologizing and informing him about the senator's offer. In return, Bernard asked Matt for a favor before the government could seize their assets. Bernard and Joe's properties had played a key role in fighting housing segregation in LA, and now they enjoy their neighboring Bahama mansions. And that's how the movie ends. What did you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.